Hello, and welcome to another season of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are entering into volumes 1 and 2 of Plume by Lynn Smith, and Lynn Smith. I love this. This is cartooning, right? This is
in
every aspect of it.
Yeah, as we talked about last season with Will Morris and Gospel, when you take the reins of the entire book, it's I think in the industry it's referred to as cartooning, and a creator like this probably maybe referred to themselves as a cartoonist, not as or maybe just a creator. You know, they wouldn't think of themselves as a writer / artist or anything like that.
I'm thinking of our interview with Alex, and he didn't think of himself as an artist. He thinks of himself as a storyteller.
Yeah.
How does he tell stories? He draws.
He draws them. Yeah. And there can be some pretension in that, but that doesn't mean there's not truth in that. You know?
No, I do think there are people who are just like, no, I don't even know what the story is. I just draw it. Like, I mean, especially the further back in comics you go.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people just took it as a gig. Because
or you go back on the Marvel side, the artists were the storytellers. You know, they got the rough outline, and then Jack Kirby would John Romita would draw all the art, and then Stan Lee would come in and put in the dialogue based on what the action was. So
in a lot of ways space there was, in
a lot of ways they were the original storytellers. But I think when you see someone, I think it's interesting that we've now back to back we've gone these two books here with Gospel and now with Plume, just having one creator like this is their work, and
both kind of
everything
on the
about it.
Small side of indie. I mean, this is as like we talked about in the Zero, I don't think I would have discovered this if she had not been at our local comic expo. Which, is not a knock on the book. It's actually in praise of comic expos. Yeah, it's like talk to people who have booths. They're great.
I mean, this is if you're walking around Artist Alley, and this is someone who's not, one of the featured guests. The featured guests are often they're at the end of rows or they're on the outskirts because they know they're going to be lines. The cons manage the big time guests because they know where people are going to line up.
Right. I got her to sign this on the same day that I burnt an hour waiting for the three people in front of me at what's his name? X-Men.
Chris Claremont.
Chris Claremont. Yeah. Yeah. And now bear in mind, I did say 1 hour wait, only three people in front of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you know, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah. Claremont's a talker, but there are, they're always the featured guests. They're the big time names who work at Marvel and DC or have a bunch of Image book or Boom or whatever. They do a lot of work. The ones that travel around the country, go to all the big shows. But there are always people, this incredible artists, we'll say in the middle down the rows that a lot of people end up walking past because they're not the big names. Some of them are just artists. They're doing prints and sketches and things like that. Some of them have their own books or, whether they self-published or on a super small press, and I think Lynn Smith is someone that's like that you'd walk by and you'd see copies of this, of a book there that you never heard of before. It's going to be on her table, Right. Trying to hand sell, and
I mean, one of the cool things,
cons, you want to go and see and talk to, and just be like, hey, like, what's up with your book, and they're there to make a living. That's what they're trying to do, and I know I've been guilty of this in the past of how I'm here to get some signatures from these big name people, but like, try to take some time to walk down every aisle of Artist Alley and see people like this, because otherwise we wouldn't have found this book. You wouldn't have found it,
No, I never would have. And speaking of this book, as is our custom, today we will be covering volumes 1 and 2, which is issues 1 through 9.
Yes,
and as we mentioned in the Zero, you should buy the omnibus edition because it's beautiful, just high quality all around. But you can read it for free at plumecomic.com.
Yeah,
and if you don't like being tethered to your phone, you can download it as a PDF, read it on your computer, read it wherever you want. It's just readily available. Super fun to read. And obviously we will not be spoiling anything in issues 10 through 19.
Yes. If you're reading the whole omnibus together, it's a very obvious stopping point,
story-wise.
Yes. Story-wise, if you're listening to this, clearly you've already read along. So we can just go ahead and say, if it's where Dominic takes control of Cork. It's very clear. It's if you were watching this or reading this, and if you were experiencing this story in any other medium, that would be the end of a season, the end of the first
Volume
movie
1,
or whatever.
yeah.
It's so obvious there, like, oh, this is a breaking point. This is where the story changes. So we're not going past that for today. Today we're just going to talk about, the book, maybe the story in general, but kind of our thoughts on those first 2 volumes / first 9 issues.
Yeah, and I've got a lot of thoughts here. First of all, we have to read what becomes the recurring theme, the iconic quote.
Yeah.
Father once told me that revenge was like a plume of black smoke. It seems tangible, but when you reach for it, you're grasping nothing but air. And at the beginning of this book, she continues, but it's not like I'm going to stop trying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so many interesting things about this. First, you see where the series gets its name, because you get the vibe very early on. This is a revenge quest.
Yes.
But as the story goes on, you start to learn everyone in this world is out for revenge. Her father is out for revenge. Yeah. Dom is out for revenge on her father. Cork has a sibling out for them. And so it's like, yes, everyone is driven and fueled by revenge. And so the challenge very early on that I read is, will our character just get the revenge, and would that be satisfying, or will she find better motivations? She's going to end up doing probably about the same things no matter what, but will she find a pure reason?
Yeah. Well, and that's always the classic revenge trope, right? The idea you start on the idea of vengeance, and that's what drives you. And at some point, typically your protagonist realizes that that's not going to be fulfilling. And of course, that's what the quote is at the beginning, the idea of grasping at this plume of smoke. And that always comes along with the idea of the revenge story, that, that even if you get it, even if you get what you want, it's just like, it's inherently not fulfilling, right? That in every revenge story, not because the act isn't fulfilling, but because your motivation simply driven by revenge, just trying to get back at somebody, that means when you get there, it's going to be empty. You know? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, in light of the revelations we get in this volume about her father, I'm wondering when he told her this, because was this kind of before he turned into a different kind of person, or was this once he turned and he's like, I chased down vengeance and it's like a plume of smoke? Is this coming from a point of like kind of parental idealism, or is this coming from the point of wisdom of like
personal experience?
I've gone down this and I'm trying to spare you this because I already made this mistake.
That's a good question. I don't know.
No, we never get to know.
It doesn't really matter, but I mean,
no, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. Although I think if he were kind of telling her in the ideal sense and then he couldn't live up to his own ideals, that tells us one thing about her or about him.
That's true.
He's
it does versus if he, let's say, came to this after, like, after,
and he's like becoming a redeemed man who like sees the folly of his ways, and he's like, if I could have anything in the world, I just want to spare my daughter this painful revelation that I've had, that revenge is a plume of smoke.
Sure, yeah, it's unattainable. You can't ever get it.
Well, revenge is always trying to hurt them like they hurt you. Yeah, and geez, I'm trying to think of what's the quote. It's like drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Nelson Mandela. Resentment is like drinking poison and hoping it will kill your enemies. Yeah. And I think, first of all,
that applies to revenge. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, if Nelson Mandela had lived through there, he could have killed the entire Western genre.
Yeah.
Because, like, and I think we talked about this a little bit with, I don't even remember what book it would have come up in, but you at one point referenced the man who shot Liberty Valance in a podcast.
Oh, yes. Yeah. When the legend becomes truth, print the legend.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which means you've seen some Westerns. Are you a Western guy?
No,
I mean, it's
no,
hard
no.
to be unless you're going back to like the 60s, 70s westerns, because like new
Yeah,
westerns are mostly redux,
yeah.
and they're
No,
not.
I mean, in terms of
And then
the
there's like Mag
classics,
7.
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, yeah. I mean, there's the classic like John Ford's, which is like Man at Liberty Valance, and then, um, like, have I seen those Sergio Leone spaghetti westerns with Clint Eastwood? Yeah, of course I've seen them because I think everyone's seen them. And then I saw Unforgiven, and you don't need to see any more westerns after that. I
right.
mean,
Whereas like my dad, he's born in 55. He just grew up in the era of western. Like
yeah,
westerns
yeah,
for him are like Marvel movies for me.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
just like, yeah, every time you go to the theater, it's not is there a western showing? It's which western are we
sure,
on right
yeah,
now?
yeah,
And is it connected to any of the other ones? Usually
yeah.
not,
Usually
except
not,
by
yeah.
John Wayne.
Yeah,
Uh,
John Wayne, or
but as a
Man with
kid,
No Name. There's, yeah,
yeah. So I wasn't like overly fascinated with westerns,
no,
but they do have a. I hate that I'm saying this. I do have a little sentimental soft spot for them now, because on like a Saturday night, if any John Wayne movie at all was coming on and my dad had the remote,
Mhm.
that's what we were watching. And so I've
but
seen
but
quite a few.
but then your attachment to the Western is not to the Western; it is actually to your father.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Although there's there's just nostalgia tied up with like the
yeah, yeah,
Western.
yeah, yeah,
And I think they are, I mean, Westerns, like as the mass Hollywood production era of Westerns were almost like Hallmark movies. Like you could
oh
just
yeah,
you can swap out the names, you can
yeah,
jump in halfway. You're
yeah,
like, I get it.
yeah,
The black
yeah,
hats rode in,
yeah. The white
and
hat, right? Yeah, no, they're yeah. That was you mentioned Marvel movies. That's so true. That was the Western was the movie. That was the style that was out.
which I pointed out to
Yeah,
boomers who complain about Marvel movie
yeah,
saturation.
yeah, yeah.
I'm like, this
Or
isn't a new thing.
superhero IP, comic book superhero
Right. So yeah,
IP. Yeah,
superhero,
yeah,
right. And I'm like, this isn't a new phenomenon. This is just the genre that's going right now.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
The comparison would be it's not just westerns. It's what if the man who shot Liberty Valance was actually happening like 3 towns over from where Shane happened, where High
right.
Noon happened, and all this was tied to the man with no name. And the man with no name actually was the guy. What if all these westerns all happened? They were in the same universe together.
Right. What if boomers were better nerds?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
if you're gonna nerd out about westerns, do it all the way.
Make a better connected universe. No,
Yeah.
I think it's when you talk about the idea of westerns, I think, I thought about this here, and maybe I don't know how fair or unfair it is to Plume, but the thing I thought about was Firefly,
Yes.
which is obviously that is
but it's clearly a great love of Western.
Yeah, that is a space Western, but I think the more you saw that show, it was more like a Western. It for all the spaciness and the sci-fi-ness of it, and of all of that, the what made that show tick was the grounded parts, I guess, for lack of a better word. The grounded aspect I felt. And so when I think about Westerns with a little bit of tweak of something, not the pure Western,
Right.
not like watching True Grit, not watching a remake of a Western or anything like that. When you think about a Western that's got a little bit of edge to it because there's something else going on, obviously in Firefly, it is the fact that we're far in the future and we're traveling through space, but it's still a Western. Here in Plume, it's the Western, but it's got that little bit of supernatural to it. I think when you and I talk about this book, you mentioned the idea of it's kind of like Indiana Jones. It's
Right.
it's real history, it's a real place, but it's got a little bit of bent to it. It's got this little bit of supernatural. Is that really happening? Could that really happen? Is this really our world? So when I think of just the non-traditional Western, my mind goes to Firefly because that's my experience of a Western, which you're right, is made by someone, people with love for Westerns and intentionally putting their spin on it. But if you didn't grow up with Westerns and you watch something like that, that's how you're seeing, that's my language for for what a Western feels like and looks like.
Well, yeah, and you and I don't, and I think Caitlin is probably young enough that the whole Western canon existed, our whole lives.
Yes.
Because there was a turning point where John Wayne's characters became more anti-hero-y.
Yeah.
And I think True Grit was his first award. And
yes,
I think in his award speech, he said, if somebody told me 15 years ago, all I had to do was put on an eye patch, I would have done it then. And it's a good line, but I also was like, does he really not understand that people liked the performance of the conflicted guy doing the help rather than just, he's a purely good guy.
The pure white hat, pure black hat. Yeah.
And so it was interesting that Westerns took a while to evolve to that. And our character here, Vesper, is almost standing on the cusp of those two eras of Western.
Yeah.
She's contemplating, she sees the appeal of being the gritty, anti-hero who's willing to kill, do this other thing, but I still have good motives, even though revenge is not a good motive.
Yeah, not a good motive.
If she does what she wants at the beginning of the book for the reason she's given at the beginning of the book, she's just straight up a villain.
She's
right. You just get arrested for that.
Yeah. She effectively becomes Dominic.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. She effectively becomes the person she's hunting down, which obviously, again, tried and true story trope of revenge story, right? You start doing the things that your enemy does in order to track them, and you justify it with being like, well, yeah, but I'm the good guy. I'm doing this. Right. I'm the good guy doing this. And of course, in here we have, a lot of times in stories you have kind of your angel and your devil on your shoulders, right. And she doesn't quite have a devil. I was thinking maybe that's someone like Tegan, but she's not quite that. But she definitely has the angel, where she has Korik being like really, Korik is the person who, for the most part, is like, no, stop this. This is not who you are, not what you should be doing.
Which is almost like a clever dual title for him as the protector. Yeah. Like, he offers physical protection, but he's offering moral protection, character protection.
Yeah.
More so, even no, never mind. That's getting ahead to the next volume.
Well, but I think what's interesting about that, I think what's implied here is that level of relationship with the protectee, because again, what is it, 600 years or whatever? Yeah. He's been, and only for the last handful has he been in the possession of the Greys, the Grey family. The sense I got reading it was that level, that relationship, that level of protection there is unique to Vesper, implying that there was something more there. That there was a level of trust between Korik and Vesper's father, Magnus. There was a level of trust there and a level of friendship. Obviously when Magnus comes back to the house and basically pulls Vesper out of it and sees Korik, they greet each other like friends, and there's a cordialness and there's clearly a friendship there, right. Which is why Magnus bequeathed this amulet over to his daughter. But I get the feeling that Korik being that angel, talking about being that moral protection, I get the sense that that's kind of maybe something that she's unlocked in him, which I guess is to imply that they have a deeper relationship. That, at least that's the way I read it, especially the first time through. When I read it, I got a sense of that their bickering back and forth, that slight flirting, whatever they have there, is something that he wouldn't have had with anyone else. That it would have just been physical protection, that right. Doing the letter of the law of what he's bound to, of no harm will come to you, no physical harm. I'll step in and do that. But him being out, being conversant, talking about that, because when she starts interrogating him about his past and where he comes from, blah blah, like he does the very magical genie thing of like, I'm not going to talk about that, or
don't worry about it.
Yeah, yeah. Don't worry about it, or if you promise to do this, then I'll, like I'm making deals about it. He's not open about it, which to me says he hasn't talked about this in several hundred years, or at least he hasn't talked about it since the Magnus went on that excursion to to his home city, so maybe
Right.
maybe he
And
hadn't
we do
talked.
get, I mean, we get a very important lesson from him in issue 2. And he does remind her, even though he seems to have an affinity for her and he likes her, he says,
Oh
here
yeah,
are the rules. I follow the necklace,
yeah,
not you.
yeah,
Meaning, don't be an idiot with the necklace,
yeah,
which
yeah,
basically forces the character from a storytelling perspective to be an
yeah,
idiot
yeah.
with the necklace.
Oh well, I mean that's that's Chekhov's don't lose this necklace.
Right.
Because that's where we get at the end of the first half of the omnibus, and then end of volume 2 was her getting careless, and we see her often threaten that, right? Not just taking it off, but actually like ripping it off, so the clasp is broken, so she can't wear it. She has to hold on to it,
Right.
that's it's almost like her way of being kind of just a rebellious child, impetuous child. You're talking about being an idiot with the locket, with the amulet. Her trying to just kind of get under the skin of Cork,
Right.
to get her to get him to do things that, I'll lose it, I'll drop it, and her not having the full idea of the full gravity of what that means until it actually happens, and Dominic ends up with it.
Yeah. I'm trying. My notes are in issue order, which is confusing because we don't do like a beat by beat recap.
Yeah.
But we've not yet talked about the third member of the party for these 2 volumes, which is Tegan.
Not yet. Yeah.
So our main characters are Vesper, obviously.
Yeah, and Korik,
obviously, he's on the cover. And now we have Tegan, who kind of seemed like a random inclusion at first. But as I kind of reread it, I was like, oh no, she's got a history with Dom. She finds out that the revenge quest is centered on Dom.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay, great. Let's, I could go for an adventure, and I hate Dom.
Yeah.
That's
and
friendships are built on less.
There's a little bit. I mean, that's again, we're talking pretty standard story tropes here of like, we're going to pull into this town and we need some help. And the person that can help us is a person who has a history with the person that we're looking for. Of all the brothels in all the world for them to go into, they happen to pick the one where the madam has a history with their quarry. So, but no, I think it works. And again, this is another aspect, and it's obviously a kind of tried and true aspect of the Western storytelling as well. The madam at the brothel, at the bar, or whatnot. Again, you think about something like Firefly.
I was just going to say, well, certainly Firefly is the low hanging.
But also, you think about Westworld, which obviously is again this idea of we're using the Western iconography to tell part of our story, in terms of white hats, black hats, things like that. But obviously, you have a similar setup there when you're in Westworld, when you're in the Western time frame there. So yeah, you get a character like Tegan, and she is the I don't want to say loose cannon, but I guess she's the one that
she's your Rocket Raccoon. She's like the pro anarchy.
Yeah, she's super direct. Whatever it is, like, hey, we're gonna go. I'm gonna say what I say. We're gonna go and we're gonna do this. There's no waffling. There's no moral confliction there. While you have Vesper. That's why I kind of mentioned that she's kind of like the devil to Coric's angel on Vesper's shoulders there. Coric's always very much the much more cautious. Hey, let don't do this, think it through. And Tegan's just kind of like, yeah, what the hell, let's go for it. She's very impulsive that way. And in the middle, you have Vesper, not so much torn there, but having to deal and kind of balance these two characters in her, while she's navigating her own, fueled by revenge quest.
Right. Well, she's learning a lot as she goes. And the question is, what will be the watershed data point where she realizes what she's doing is folly? Mm-hmm. And I loved at the end of chapter 5, she finds out that her dad tried twice to kill Dom and has left scars each time. And, it's this classic Luke to Obi-Wan, why didn't you tell me, to Korik? And Korik says, I'm here I'm merely here to protect you from harm. Not all harm is physical. And this is quite the twist on the genie tale. That he is interested in her character and her emotional well-being. You know, like Robin Williams' genie was interested in Aladdin's character. But
at the end there, yeah,
at the end. So, not unheard of, but this is a little bit more, this is kind of like, I don't know, not Leon the Professional, but definitely the old wise bodyguard with the young reckless protectee, which there are, obviously if it were a movie now, it would have to be Pedro Pascal.
Oh yeah. There's a little lone wolf,
the wise old protector.
Yeah. But no, I do think there is the twist there being that, it's like he's bound by this curse or whatever, he did this spell, but he's allowed to, in some ways, like interpret it.
Yes,
like right. Because he could choose.
He could do the letter of the law.
Yeah.
And he's trying to do the spirit of the law.
Exactly. Yeah. He could do either. And I think we're seeing that evolution there because, right before that, when at the end of issue 5 there, when she says, the back and forth between Cork and Vesper, when he says, I'm merely here to protect you from harm. And we have a silent panel of beat there. And then Vesper kind of looks away and says, not all harm is physical. Right before that, he's saying like, I'm not someone you're supposed to confide in. I'm not supposed to be your friend, So there's this idea that, so you read that there and at the end of issue 5, which is,
end of trade 1.
End of trade 1. And then that recontextualizes what you've seen the first 4+ issues.
Right.
You see their relationship, especially at the very beginning of the story. When she uses the mask and they have the carriage with the flaming wings and all, and there's some levity there and almost like some like borderline slapstick humor there in terms of what their relationship is like. And then so to have that and to have that be everything we've read about them, and then to get to here and him basically almost feeling like maybe I've made a mistake, maybe I've gotten too close. I'm not supposed to do this. I'm supposed to simply protect you. I'm not supposed to help you almost.
Right. Or be wrapped up in these generational family dramas.
Yeah. I'm merely supposed to protect you from harm, whatever I think that means. And yet we can see that how whatever his programming is, for the spell, that what he says in those 2 panels of like, I'm not somebody supposed to confide in, I'm not supposed to be your friend. But everything we've seen from him previous to that is contradictory.
Right.
Everything we've seen from him so far, all we know of him and what we've seen of him and what we saw in the flashbacks of his history, when he shows up, when she falls to the ice, like everything about that says, well, like you haven't, like that's not what you've been doing,
Yeah, although
up until this point,
it does seem like until she fell on the ice, he had always been around. Is what he said.
Yes, yeah.
So I think
in that moment he
was fond of her, right?
Yeah,
and he decided, I'm not going to be the detached protector after 10+ years or whatever. I'm going to be present in her life, and now he's trying to put the cork back on the bottle. Saying,
trying to put the genie back in the bottle, perhaps.
Yes. Yeah. See, I almost said that, and I thought you would roll your eyes, but you give yourself a free pass.
Oh no, I could say it. I'm totally. It's fine when I do it. Talking about, but no, I
remember I had to actually insert crickets entering our underwater welder.
That
was going to do a deep dive into that.
Yeah, book. That was terrible. But no, I think what's interesting. Yeah. I think that's an interesting character beat for Korik here, in that he is now trying to, because of what they've seen and what they've witnessed and what they've experienced, he now feels like, wait, maybe I've made a mistake here. Maybe by indulging her, by the idea of like, well, I'll be there to protect you.
Right.
maybe he feels like
the fact
he's
that
giving
he
her
has character beats, the fact that he's
Yeah.
600 years he's been doing this,
yeah
and he's still learning, he's still growing, he's still deciding how he wants to go about this. I mean, in 600 years, it is a lot of memory to hold. It makes me think of the book 80 After Death, where humans no longer die, and they do these life cycles. Well, they'll go be a farmer for 200 years or something like that, and it's functionally the same as like reincarnation there, because they're like, I think I used to do this, or I think I used to know someone like this like 400 years ago, but who could really say? And it's like, do you really have distinct memories from all 600 of those years, or are you still growing and changing, and you can't even retrace the lines of how you got where you are?
You are, let's see, you are immortal. I think that the idea of effectively being resurrected every time is right, because at some point you're going to be like, did we do that? I don't really know. I think that comes with any story when we're talking about immortals or near immortals. A recent one that I love.
Obvious trade-off.
Yeah. Recent story that I love from Greg Rucka and Leandro Fernandez is The Old Guard. People may have seen the movie on Netflix or whatnot, but that's about a group of effectively immortal soldiers, and a lot of time is then, how much do they remember? And I think with their story, what they've done is they can remember a lot. Those characters for the most part remember a lot of things, a lot of details, because they've been warriors. But that's always a thing about that, of how much more character growth can you get when you live that long? And maybe the question isn't how much you can get, but maybe it's how often do you do it? Like you could have an entire arc as in the first 300 years of your life, and maybe by that 300 years you've reverted back to where you started because you've seen everything, you've experienced everything. And
right. I love
you've forgotten all the things that you knew.
Even when you've forgotten certain things, you don't necessarily lose your progress. You just can't explain why you are the way you are anymore.
Oh, sure.
Another good, we're not sponsored by Marvel, I swear. Another good comic shout out would be like the Immortal Hulk run, where wasn't the premise that he had, Hawkeye try to kill him. Yeah. And he wiped out Bruce Banner's memory. And now Hulk is the smart one.
Yeah.
Hulk is the one who has the enduring memory.
Yeah.
So he has to, figure out who he is. And, he already has tendencies and personality traits, but no memories.
So,
always an interesting situation. So anyway, we're getting a little off the rails with Cork, but he is a very interesting character.
Yeah.
Because he's not a fixed, he's not a prop, which I think a lot of times, your magical source becomes kind of just something we just punch the goblin. Everyone, there's a board game reference where anytime you can't do something else in your turn, you just punch the goblin. So I use that very loosely now. But just anytime you need magic, you just go to the magical MacGuffin and get it from it. And it's kind of personalityless, lifeless, whatever. And this is a thinking, growing being that is still on his own character journey, his own character arc, which we get to see the backstory of. Now, there's still 600 years missing in between. So we don't really know everything he's been through, but we know his history with the Greys. We know his history with his own family. By the way, I don't think I would be having any pro-family views, Greys or otherwise, if my family treated me the way that Cork's family.
It's a tough look. It's a tough look for him and his siblings there. I guess my one of my questions with Cork is, like, does he choose when he comes out of the amulet? Because like obviously he shows up.
It seems like he has
initially when Vesper's initially in trouble. When she obviously we've seen he's there throughout his life, but the impetus for this story is she goes out on the ice, she falls through, he comes out, saves her, and then he's just around now. And is that because she's just going to put herself in danger and wants to be there, or does he choose to be out there, or is she there's a little bit of like, what are the rules here aspect, like when is, because what you talked about before about him not being a prop, that's what it is, and then there's the excuse of like, our magical being is here, does the thing, and then goes away, and we call him back whenever we need him. but oh no, wait, then there's going to be a story reason where we can't call him. We don't have that power there. There's a natural hindrance to the storytelling. But with here, he's just there all the time. And
Right.
again, I have a little fuzziness on the rules of that when he appears and why he's just around. Is it his choice? Is it her choice?
Right.
And
I think that's interesting.
It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter the storytelling.
It doesn't matter, except that we have the understanding that for a long time he was basically hiding out in the amulet, not making an appearance.
He's non-corporeal form. Yes.
Once he comes to corporeal form, he basically doesn't leave again.
In this story, yeah.
In this story, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to spoil anything out of this, but
he's there. So
right. So anyway, he knows all this backstory with Bennett. Bennett's gang killing her mother. She doesn't know her mother
was murdered.
Murder. So she gets that little juicy tidbit at the beginning of 6 after getting dirt on her dad in volume 5.
Yeah.
And so it's her dad's fault that Bennett killed her mom. Then he kills Bennett. And then Bennett's son is mad at him. And Bennett's son kills her dad. Yeah. And it's just like, that's the literal eye for an eye till everyone's blind.
Yes. Yeah. That's the vicious circle of revenge right there.
Yeah. And yet we press on to the city of, how are you pronouncing this? Auru.
Aru. I said Aru at first.
Okay.
I guess it could be
I'm impressed you said anything at all, because when I read something like that, I don't even come up with the pronunciation. I'm like, yeah, know that place.
Oh well, no. I mean, I saw AUR, and I thought, okay, what's the most common word I could think of, especially aura, given what we see about it as this golden glow kind of thing. So I thought aura, and then just replace that A with a U. So are you? That's what I went with. So
right, and we get the confrontation with the shadow monster, who is, as it turns out, Azil.
There's also an idea of like Aryu being Auric. That's gold as well. I just thought of that as well. I can't believe it came up earlier.
Yep.
That's why gold is AU.
We'll put it in editing. It'll be the first thing we mention.
Yeah. Take that out, and so we seem smarter. But no, that just came to me now when I said the gold shimmer. It's like, wait a minute. Right. Of course, it's got to be Auric, because it's anyway.
How many years has it been since you had to memorize the periodic table? Probably more recently for you.
Well, no. What I'm actually ashamed of is like, that's Goldfinger's name, Auric Goldfinger. That's the thing we're ashamed of. Like it's a James Bond thing that we didn't get. So,
and you know what? I had already looked up Scaramanga's name, because he's the man with the golden gun.
Yes,
and you see the prominent golden gun as a relic throughout this book. And
we'll get that. Yeah.
I was trying to think of a sneaky way to like sneak that in and miss the much more obvious Bond reference.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
This is what we're recording at 9 a.m. on a Saturday.
We
normally don't do this. It's a false start.
Not enough coffee, not enough bacon or whatever. I don't know.
Right, yeah.
Okay. But anyway, so listen, the most obvious thing we should have gotten, it is definitely Aura, or Aru, whatever.
We know all about it.
Yeah, definitely. Totally got that right the first time. But anyway, continue about that.
Yeah, I'm just like, if Kaylin is listening to this episode, I'm sure just beating her head against the desk in President Bartlett fashion.
Yeah.
So anyway, Cora confronts Azil.
Mm-hmm.
We see surprising twist. So she goes after Dom, and then Dom, surprise twist, betrays them, steals the amulet.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure I'm not spoiling. This is where she had the conversation of, I don't want you protecting me because of the amulet. I want you to choose to protect me. And that's why she's not wearing it.
Yes, that is.
She was technically still in possession of it, but she was not going to wear it and keep it safe because I just want to make sure that's not volume 3. There's no way that's volume 3. It's volume 1 or 2.
I'm trying to think here. Yeah, at some point
but we see her like kind of eschewing privilege to say, our friendship matters to me more than my ability to command you.
Yeah.
And the comp that I kept coming back to as I was reading their relationship. First of all, I was very refreshed that it was not, reckless damsel in distress with basically an omnipotent protector, who is just a damsel in distress. I'm very glad it didn't go that direction.
Yeah.
And the direction it actually made me think of is Harry and Dobby in Harry Potter. Dobby kind of comes in as this protector, even though he's a servant class, and Harry insists on being equals and treating his friends, even though we see Harry not perfectly, letting himself off of the privilege hook. He still uses privilege plenty within the wizarding world.
Sure.
But we see a protector who they end up sacrificing for each other, even though it was meant to be a one-way relationship. It's the second Harry Potter book. Dobby is just trying to save Harry's life by keeping him away from Hogwarts.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of the book, you see Harry setting Dobby free. And then they continue to collaborate in book 4, even though he's not depicted in the movies again until number 7 or 8. So anyway, that it was a similar enough relationship where I was like, okay, we have a wise old protector with a little more power, but a little less stature working with our protagonist. And I just thought I'd shout it out.
Well, there's also
listeners will know it's a real stretch for me to find a Harry Potter connection.
Yeah. But I think there's something to the idea of, you've now mentioned both the genie from Aladdin and Dobby from Harry Potter. There is this sense of like with our protagonist of I'm grateful for your help. I'm not going to abuse that because I'm inherently a good person. Right. But this idea of also wanting,
I'm not going to do what you want me to do. Right.
Yeah, but I'm not going to always listen to you. But I understand your intention. But this idea of wanting to free you of this,
Yes.
And the idea that you are bound and you understand you're bound by it, and maybe you commit yourself this is your only existence. But there's this sense of like I need to do whatever I can to free you of, yes. Even though I am benefiting from it. Again, that is her in this case here. This Vesper is kind of putting that or trying to put that bit of privilege aside. This idea that she has a personal protector as long as she has this necklace, this amulet, that she can effectively go do anything and know that this incredibly powerful magical being is going to be there to save her and help her. She's trying to put that aside because there's something greater than that she can see and has experienced. And this idea of wanting to set this being free, this person free from the shackles that have been put on them, that were out of their control. So so in that way, I think this is in that lineage of that kind of, that magical being character, whether it's wish granting or whatnot, it does fall in line with those other kind of stories.
And I think it's more interesting than just having, you can imagine in this book when Dom takes possession of it, he is not going to strive for that type of relationship. Just like when Jafar takes possession of Genie, you're like, they're not going to do a buddy parade, and all this other stuff, all the tomfoolery.
Yeah, and you see how the Malfoys treat Dobby versus what Harry does. Yeah, so I think when you get to the end of volume 2 here and you see that Dominic has control, like you're right. That whatever when we next encounter them, because obviously that's what they're going to do. That's what Tegan and Vesper are going to do. They're going to go hunt down and in their mind, I'm sure in Vesper's mind, we have to save Korik. They have to save Korik from Dominic. That when we see them again, that whatever Dom has him doing is not going to be it almost polar opposite of what Vesper was. That relationship is not going to be the same.
And we know that she will not stop going after Dom and now Korik.
Yeah.
Because she has not yet grasped that plume of smoke.
Yeah.
But again, just halfway through, that would be like, Han Solo being frozen in carbonite, and then the next movie they're just like, well, that's the end of the Han Solo story. No.
Yeah. But no, I think you talked about earlier at the beginning of where, if and when does Vesper's motivation change? And I think here we could see a potential for it. And that, yes, still going for Dominic because Dominic is still the source of her problems. But is she now going after? Is it still a revenge story, or is it now in her mind a rescue story? And I think that's an interesting way to look at going into the back half of the book of what now is her motivation tracking down Dom. Is it to?
Yeah.
Is it still? One of your cats is back there. Is it still purely revenge?
Crazy.
Is it still? I got to get Dom because Dom got my dad. Is that what it is, or has it shifted now? I need to save Korik, and I think that's where Vesper is left at the end of volume 2 there, right in the middle. And this idea of what is she chasing after? What's going to drive her to keep going? What's that motivation? Is it still revenge, or is it now a rescue mission?
Yeah, a friend of mine once said in something he was writing, he said, if it weren't for mixed motivations, I wouldn't have any motivations at all.
Yeah.
And so I think, people and characters are more likely to have pure motivations than people are, real people. And so when I see a character in a piece of fiction start to get mixed motives, and it becomes this cocktail of like, revenge is still in there. It's if I'm honest, I would still enjoy the revenge of it, but I do have to rescue. And then, and a lot of times they'll have both of those motives. They will offer forth to their friends, here's the pure motive. This is why we're doing this, while secretly holding the less desirable motive inside, even if that one eclipses the other.
But they'll put the facade out of this while we're doing it. And then once you're there, the character then becomes faced with the choice, right? Do we now that we're here and both options are at hand, what do we go with? Do we make the choice for the pure motive, or do we focus solely on revenge? And that's the source of many, many, many stories. And I think that's where we leave Vesper here. This idea of, well, now I have to get to Dom because he has core, which does now, of course, that complicates the first motive of revenge. If he has this all powerful magic being as his protector now, that makes the first problem harder. So it's almost like we got to do step 1, which is save Korik, and then we can do step 2, which is avenge my father. So you can kind of see it. Maybe it goes that way, but I do think from a character standpoint, at the end of these first 2 volumes, we've seen Vesper now. She's going to be faced with that choice.
Yes, her trajectory to me has become more noble, even though her actions have been going down the wrong path.
I think so.
And I think that's it's just a really great way for the story to unfold. Yeah. And I have stopped myself 3 times now from bumping into the next volume. So I need to wrap soonish.
Sure.
So that I'm not I almost instinctively flipped over to my volume 3 notes. Yeah. So I'm going to keep it on this page.
One thing I will say about that, you mentioned her trajectory. I think one thing we didn't mention was in between that was, at some point Dominic gets all these other artifacts from them, all these highly dangerous artifacts. And even then we see a little shift from Vesper being like, well, now we got to get those back. Right. So even then we talk about her trajectory of her motivation changing. It's now just, well, he can't have those. They're too dangerous for a guy like him. So we need to stop him and get those back. Again, this idea that sure, they're still in some ways pillaging ancient civilizations and taking their stuff. But their nobility there is they understand they're dangerous and they're trying to put them somewhere where they can't do anybody harm. So I guess they could,
well, the other thing kind of
it belongs in museum part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so we're taking it from
I love these pop culture references, by the way.
But there's the idea of, yes, we're taking it from the indigenous people of what they have there, but we're putting it in a wooden crate and losing it in a warehouse, which means no one can get to it. So there's the sense of a greater good thing. That's kind of what Magnus has been doing. And so we see Vesper do that as well, of like, we have these things, we're going to use them to protect ourselves, but we can't let them fall into his hands. So we have to go after him because now he has these artifacts. So again, it's not just about avenging her father. We got to get these things back from him because he can't be trusted with them. and that evolves now to that artifact being Korik. He can't be trusted with Korik because through Korik he can do some pretty terrible stuff. You know, it isn't just like that. The one ball that's like the Power Stone.
Yeah,
you know, it's more than just that, or the mask that gives you the flaming wings. Like Korik is the all powerful artifact. He's like the end all be all one that Dominic can't be trusted with. And so Vesper now working her way through her journey of just, you know, different reasons to go after Dominic that are more than just he's the guy that killed her father.
Yeah, well, and that's a great segue, because what I was going to say, the other thing chipping away at her revenge motivation, not only is she getting new motivation to move forward rather than revenge, she also has to ask the question, is my father a person worth avenging?
Yeah.
I mean, she's really had, like, her mom's dead because of her dad, functionally.
Yeah.
Her dad's dead because of her dad.
Yeah.
It is getting even with the guy who killed her dad gonna solve anything? Does it make her dad a better person again?
Especially when we get this when we get Dominic's backstory. This again, they're giving your villain a tragic backstory. But yeah, this idea that, you know, A kills B, B kills C, C kills D. You know, there's this back and forth there of, yeah, like, is it Dominic's fault that they're, or is it Dominic and Vesper's fault that their fathers had at it and killed each other and did all that? You know, like, is that sin passed down? It seems like it has, that generational trauma of this continual family feud. But like, it's not Dom's fault that for what his father did, and it's not Dom's fault or Vesper's fault what Magnus did, you know, but yet they carry that on. And so from Vesper's standpoint, I think she sees Dom, I think, starting to see him a little sympathetically. He's still a jerk, right, like on his own accord, but the idea that he would go seeking revenge for his father, I think, starts chipping away at what Vesper is doing and how she sees herself and how she sees her father as well. I think you're right about that. This idea of maybe my father wasn't this idealized person. This comes into now this one, maybe a little more direct in terms of the character archetype. Now we're getting into Lara Croft Tomb Raider area. The idea of the little girl who idolizes her father for, you know, robbing indigenous people of their culture, only to grow up and see that, wait, that's actually a bad thing, and maybe there's something else we can do about that. Which is how they tried to recontextualize Lara Croft. But you know, that's a little more direct one-to-one,
right? And I've heard
with our character with Vesper.
I mean, I've heard rumors of like a new Indiana Jones reboot. Of I can't remember where I heard this, but somebody was pitching Oscar Isaac as someone going and robbing museums to give it back to the people things were taken from. And I'm like, I think that's just a completely different franchise, but I'm 100% on board for it. Like, that's just not Indiana Jones.
I think that came out of Moon Knight, because his character Stephen Grant worked at the British Museum. Well, no, he worked at the British Museum.
But I heard someone pitch it on a podcast, and it
wasn't. But that idea has floated around for a while. The idea of the not the treasure hunter, but the treasure protector or treasure returner, you know, that sort of thing. You know, it and they kind of tried that with the most recent Tomb Raider, the one with Alicia Vikander, where she isn't like actually robbing tombs. She's trying to stop that, but you still have a story where you're still going into these civilizations and finding these ancient artifacts and things like that. But so they're trying to recontextualize this idea of archaeologists and treasure hunters and things like that, to varying degrees of effect. But the specific idea here of the idea of hero worshiping your father, this is what he did, and then your father is taken from you, and then you decide to take up his mantle, and then you start realizing, well, he wasn't the perfect man that I thought he was. Again, that's a very, very common story structure, common character trait and story trope for the. It oftentimes is father. It really is father-daughter, right? I was going to say parent-child, but this one really is hardcore trope father-daughter, right?
Yes.
For better, for worse, it's almost always that way, where the daughter idolizes her father and then realizes that he's not the man that she thought he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to start naming tropes, but I think we've dropped so many genre call outs.
We really have.
It would take, I think it would take a full weekend. If you were unfamiliar with American pop culture, listening to our podcast and reading this book, it would take you maybe a month of weekends to catch up on, between the Westerns, the Bond, the Harry Potter, the Indiana Jones, the West Wing. Yeah. All the things that we've dropped
and literally all other major comic book franchises.
Yes. Yeah. Just go read every Incredible Hulk and it was Immortal Hulk. That was the call.
Immortal Hulk. Yeah. The recent one.
Anyway, that is all I have on these two. I've got, a lot more to say when we dive into the next two. Any concluding thoughts here?
One thing I want to say that's outside of the story, something that you and I talked about pre-show was, before we leave this story here, and we could talk about it next week as well. Just want to talk about the art style that Kaylin has and the specifics in this story. Something we talked about how so much of the book, so much of the panels are just character focus, and it's a very specific choice where it's either close-up ish of a character's face or two characters together in a 2-shot or even a 3-shot. That there's a very hard delineation between the character in the foreground and what's happening in the background. And there is a slight change, I think, in what it looks like in line work, definitely in coloring. There's the obvious color pops, the gold, which, clearly we should have known, but that's Korik's face. It's Magnus's special 7 shooter. That's gold. The amulet and necklace is obviously very gold. Those pop no matter whenever you see them, they pop right off the page. Obviously Vesper's eyes, that just incredibly harsh blue eyes just pop right out. And even Tegan, she has the green eyes too, which pop out on the screen. Not so much as Vesper's. Maybe it's more so to keep them delineated, but Tegan gets the very comic booky character of bright red hair, bright green eyes. That's a very, very common comic book connection there. But I think the way that Kaylin has decided to do this, the way that she has drawn it is that it's all character. Like I said, it's very, 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 very rarely, and it's usually beginning or end of an issue where you get like a big full page splash.
A big scene. And I think
there aren't double page splashes, and I think that comes from the fact that this was originally was published on the web. It was a webcomic.
Right.
So she's not thinking in terms of page turns so much. It's more in terms of scrolling to the next one. So you don't get the big 2-page double splash. If anything, you get the 1-page splash, but those are very rare. And when we get them, like when I think it's the end of issue 4, right? When Tegan is joined up with them, and it's Vesper, Tegan, and Korik, and they're riding off, and you get that big kind of John Ford shot of the mesas and all that in the background, and it's just you get one really big gorgeous shot. Those are rare. She's not using those often, so she's putting those in there for effect, usually an opening or a closing beat. But outside of that, the way the characters are outlined, the way they're colored, it's so clear that they're being foregrounded that it makes great use, I think, of her facial expressions, the way that she draws characters and faces. We talked about how her characters have these very massive, I'm going to call them Disney eyes. I don't know. We don't know if that's Kaylin's actual inspiration or kind of influence there.
Look, I was going to say you can call them Disney eyes, you can call them like anime eyes.
Yeah. Well, but I think when you look at Vesper, there's a Disney princess aspect to her face and her hair.
I agree.
All of that, and again, I don't know if that's exactly what Kaylin's influence is, but it evokes that. And so having these very large expressive eyes and being so character focused, she uses the reaction shots very well and facial expressions very well, knowing that's taking up the majority of the panels on the page. It said even in some of the bigger action scenes, like the shootouts and the fights and things like that, she makes it a point that all these characters are foregrounded. So it's letting you know that the focus is always on the character, that no matter what's happening here, you need to be focusing on what Vesper is going through, or Magnus, or Tegan, or Korik, or even Dominic. That, you know, we have a small group of characters right now. You're right. It does expand. It gets bigger in the second half of the story. But for these first 2 volumes, you know, it's a real small, real dedicated story on this group of characters. And so you're following them and all of their arcs, and every page, every panel is meant to keep your focus on that. And it's not so much about what is Dominic after, what was Magnus after, what's the next treasure. Like, it's not about the archaeology. It's not about the finding. It's not about the artifacts. That's a different story. That's a different comic. This is all about the people, the characters, and how their lives, as we keep finding out, how they've intertwined, you know, over the years.
Yeah, you could take the magical elements away and still tell the same story. That's just the setting. Yes, and the setting, I think, would be interchangeable here. The character pieces are not.
Yeah. Korik could just be a bodyguard.
To that.
Forget being a magical bodyguard.
He could just be, you know, the 70-year-old sniper, you know, who used to be a Navy SEAL or whatever. But
he could just be, he could be Rooster Cobra. He could just be that.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And in these dialogue only panels, I do love that when she uses a backdrop, there's a good reason for it. Otherwise, you get kind of the Jonathan Hickman treatment, where it'll just kind of be a color or a pattern, where it's like, you're not going to be staring at this long enough. You're capturing the facial expression and a few words, and you keep moving. I don't need to redraw like the hill and the vista behind them.
Yeah. Well, I think where at me right now is a great example of that is the flat is when they get to Uru, and there's a couple wide shots of like, oh, here's a giant mural, but it's kind of faded and there's some vines growing over it. It's a little indistinct, because that makes sense. It's 600 some plus years old. No one's been there in a while. And then you got a couple scenes where maybe in the background there's a doorway or an archway or stairs or something like that, but it's not in every single scene, because you don't need that in every single scene. You have some establishing shots there. You see where they are. You see a couple of kind of wider view, wider angle lens shots, get a sense of the environment. But yeah, you don't need to see every single shot in the background there. Now you just know you're there. You know you're there. You see what the color palette is. You know, obviously we're at an ancient kind of abandoned city. So a lot of grays, a lot of dark colors, very muted there. And that's all you need to have. Maybe a couple vines in the background, you know, overgrown vegetation.
Sure.
That's all you need. You don't need any more than that. That gives you the setting, and puts you in the right space to know where the characters are. You don't need to be reinforced. You don't have to have that detailed background every single time. It's cool that some creators do that. You know, it's a lot of extra work. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just funny to me, because it's one of those things where if they try to do that in a TV show, you know, it would totally break. You know, if it was like, oh, we just walked into this room and now they're just standing in front of a green screen or a black wall. Yeah. You'd be like, I'm sorry, where are they right now? Yeah. In a comic, the suspended belief and the way you read, I mean, I think a lot of readers wouldn't even notice that. Like, I think,
and they're not supposed to
pause. Right.
They're not supposed to. It's supposed to be that if the creators are doing the right thing, or in this case, creator doing the storytelling right, that your mind fills in those gaps. You know, it's in the same way that your mind fills in motion and action on a static image, going from panel to panel, page to page. Your mind should fill in those gaps. But you're right, it doesn't work on a TV or a movie, which is why you have like things that maybe are overly CGI'd, or you have like The Volume, where they film, you know, pretty much every Star Wars and Marvel thing now. You know, that you have to be set in a place. You can't just be nowhere. You can't just have these, and sometimes it doesn't work, right? Where you have the establishing shot of like Baltimore, and then they're filming. You're like, nope, that's Vancouver. You know, when you get on the close-ups or whatnot. So you're right.
A great shout out to Jason Concepcion on Binge Mode. Every time he called out the Atlanta nature of Spider-Man's Queens, he was like, as he's running through the beautiful suburbs of Atlanta.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember too that even in Black Widow early on when they're leaving their house, they pass a high school. In Ohio, they pass a high school football stadium, and you can see what team it is. That's a team in Atlanta. Like it's school in Atlanta, It's not they didn't find stock footage from like Maslin or something like that. It's Atlanta there. But I think you're right to point that out about comics, that it's something you can, I guess, get away with. I guess that's the phrase, right? You can get away with that sort of storytelling in this medium, because
I think not only can you get away with it when it's wisely deployed, which it is here, it keeps you moving at the right speed as a reader. Because I think if you bog down every panel with detail, you're making the reader slow down. Right.
That's a good point. I like that. Yeah.
And so when she's doing quick reaction shots, and there are beats like arrest in music, it's like, the melody is still happening. Arrest is part of the melody. Yeah. And
we're focused on the character's face, not looking at what's in the background, what's happening back there. There's no extraneous information, right? You're being shown exactly what you need to see at the pace that she wants you to see it at.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as I'm looking at, some of my framed art here, every single one of these has at least one panel on them where the background just doesn't exist. Now, like the one I'm looking at right above my screen is a Jorge Jimenez Batman, and he is a very detailed artist.
Yeah,
but he still has one little panel.
So good though.
Oh, it's so good. But
I love Jorge Jimenez.
One little panel where it's Batman with a white background, no texture or anything like that. It's in the extreme minority of his work. But everyone does.
Which means that panel there, I'm sure we can find the actual colored page. Yeah, it's probably just it's colored background. Maybe it's textured. That's just up to the colorist, whatever that would end up being. But yeah, I think it you see it. I think you're right. You see it often here. When they're in the woods or something like that. There's just some green in the background, right? It's like green on the top, the panels in the background, a little brown on the bottom because your leaves on the top, and there's tree trunks in the bottom. That's all it is. You know? It's just enough to give you, they're in the woods now. Yes. That's all you need. And that's enough. And that's enough because when you saw them a few pages earlier, when an establishing shot, you saw some trees there, actual trees. And now that they're talking, now there were close-ups, you just know where they are. That's it. You're not focused on that. And I said, I really like what you said about the idea of that's part of the pacing, the intentional pacing there of.
Yeah, a smart reader. Well, I mean, an intuitive reader will just learn. I'm not supposed to dwell on this panel. Yeah. And by the same metric,
when you get the detailed one,
let's pause here for a second, take a beat.
Yeah, that is true. That's very true. Very true.
So anyway, great stuff. More of that coming for sure in volumes 3 and 4.
Definitely.
I think new characters coming in volumes 3 and 4. And a new direction for existing characters and plot lines.
Well, definitely. Whole new paradigm. Vesper doesn't have Korik. Korik's with the bad guy now, effectively the bad guy. So it's there's a great setup. I mean, that'd be your season finale cliffhanger, right? And you got to wait all summer for what's going to happen when it comes back, a TV show kind of thing, or you got to wait several years or whatnot. But thankfully we can just keep reading and go right into the rest of the story.
Yep. All right. Well, if you're reading online, keep reading online. If you're reading the single issues, start with issue 10, go all the way to 19 for next Thursday. If you're reading the
17.
Trades, 17.
17 is the end. Yes.
If you're going to, well, I was counting the 2 bonus issues that are only in the omnibus.
That is true. That's true.
We'll tease those next week. If you can get a hold of them, great. I think they're only in the printed omnibus. So track it down. It's worth having on the shelf. Really pretty book. If not, volumes 3.
Great quality book. As we talked about last week. Just not only does it look great, it feels great. It's a really, really solid investment.
Yeah, it is a sewn binding, so it just lays flat. It's not, the glue stuff where you have to break it in one spot and then it lays crooked on your shelf and you think about it as you're going to sleep at night. Maybe that's just me. Too detailed.
Little too personal there. But go out, find the book. If you can, buy the omnibus. If you can't find it or it's not available to you, plumecomic.com.
At Plume Comic, that's what it's for. And share it with friends. Like, this is the easiest plug in the world. Say, here's a website. Go read this and listen to our podcast. You can find us on all the things formerly known as Twitter, places currently known as Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram, occasionally Threads when we remember, and always on storiedarcs.com. Give us a 5-star rating if you are thinking of it on your podcast app. Whatever you're listening to us on right now, seems like a great place to do it. We'd appreciate it. Share it with a friend, and we will talk to you later.
Peace.